My roommate smiled sweetly as she poured acid on my face. Everything should have been mine, Jenny. Melissa's voice cracked with years of hidden resentment as I writhed on our dorm room floor, the chemical fire eating through my skin. The scholarship, David's love, the Morrison Tech internship, all of it. Through my agony, I could barely focus on her face hovering above me, no longer the innocent girl I'd trusted with my life. The antique music box lay open beside us, its tiny ballerina frozen mid-spin, the strange mist that had triggered this nightmare still lingering in the air. Why? I gasped, my hands clawing at my burning flesh. Because you're everything I'll never be, she hissed, pulling out her phone. But don't worry. After your tragic lab accident, everyone will remember sweet, grieving Melissa who tried so hard to save her beloved roommate. Her voice suddenly shifted to panicked innocence as she dialed 911. Please, help! My roommate was doing a chemistry experiment and something went wrong. She's hurt so badly. The lies flowed like poison from her lips. Chemistry experiment, accident, my fault. As darkness consumed my vision, I watched her carefully close the music box, erasing evidence of the supernatural trap that had sealed my fate. She'd planned this perfectly. The sympathetic roommate, the tragic accident inheriting my entire future. I'll take good care of David, she whispered in my ear as my breathing grew shallow. And that internship? They'll give it to me out of sympathy for my loss. Then everything went black. Jenny, wake up! You're going to be late for Professor Williams's lecture. My eyes snapped open to find Melissa shaking my shoulder, her face creased with apparent concern. The same face that had watched me die moments ago. But I was in my dorm bed, sunlight streaming through our window, campus life buzzing outside. I bolted upright, hands flying to my face, expecting ravaged flesh. Instead, smooth, unblemished skin. My reflection showed the same auburn-haired, green-eyed girl I'd always been. Are you okay? Melissa perched on my bed, wearing her favourite lavender sweater. You look like you've seen a ghost. I stared at this girl I'd once called my best friend. She looked exactly as she had months ago when we'd first met. Her blonde hair was shorter, her face softer, lacking the hardness that had eventually consumed her. What day is it? I croaked. September 15th, first day of advanced organic chemistry, the class you've been obsessing over all summer. She tilted her head. You were thrashing in your sleep, mumbling about a music box. The music box. My gaze shot to her dresser. Empty except for a succulent and family photos. No antique death trap. Not yet. September the 15th. 6 months before my scholarship announcement. 7 months before meeting David. 8 months before the Morrison internship applications. Nearly a year before Melissa would reveal her true nature and murder me. Just a weird dream, I said, standing on unsteady legs. Melissa's hand caught my wrist, her grip light but trembling slightly. Jenny, you know you can tell me anything, right? We're roommates, friends. If something's bothering you, I want to help. The words were perfectly crafted, sickeningly familiar. This was how it had started. Melissa positioning herself as my confidant while cataloguing every detail of my life, preparing to steal it all. Of course, I replied, matching her sweet tone. You're the best roommate I could ask for. Her radiant smile, the one that had fooled me completely before, lit up her face. Good, now hurry up. I made coffee and got those blueberry muffins you love. As she left, I sank back onto my bed, mind reeling. This was impossible. Dead people didn't get second chances. Time didn't flow backward. But I could feel the truth in my bones, the perfect clarity of memories from that other timeline. I remembered David's laugh when he'd first approached me. I remembered the Morrison Tech internship email. Professor Williams' recommendation letter. Every conversation, every step in Melissa's elaborate plan to destroy me and claim my life. and I remembered the music box that would arrive in exactly 7 months and 13 days. I dressed quickly, practicing expressions in the mirror. Surprise, confusion, the eager trust of a naive girl. I had played this role unknowingly before. This time, I'd play it by choice. Melissa waited by the door with my backpack and coffee. I thought we could walk together. I know how nervous you get on first days. Another lie, I'd never been nervous about new classes. I was excited by them, but she was already rewriting my history, casting me as fragile and dependent. "That's so sweet," I said, accepting the offerings. "What would I do without you?" Her smile widened, and I caught something flickering in her eyes. Satisfaction. The look of a predator convinced her prey was trapped. "You'll never have to find out," she replied, linking our arms. As we crossed campus, Melissa chatted about classes and weekend plans, asking about my schedule and professors' questions that had seemed friendly before but now felt like reconnaissance. "Oh, Jenny," she said as we neared the science building, "I've been thinking about redecorating our room. Maybe adding some antiques. I saw this adorable music box at an estate sale last weekend." Ice flooded my veins, but I kept my expression neutral. 7 months too early. She was already planting seeds, laying groundwork for that cursed gift. In the original timeline, the music box had appeared suddenly, supposedly an impulse purchase to cheer me up. But now I saw the truth. She'd been planning from the very beginning. "A music box sounds lovely," I said, sipping coffee to hide my expression. "So romantic and mysterious." "Exactly." Her eyes lit up. "This one's particularly special. The seller said it belonged to a woman who used it to, let's just say, she was very successful at getting what she wanted." The pieces clicked into place, painting a picture darker than I'd understood, even in my final moments. This wasn't just jealousy. Melissa had sought out that music box, specifically for its dark history and darker purpose. She'd planned my death from the moment we met. "How fascinating," I murmured. "I can't wait to see it." At the chemistry building entrance, Melissa squeezed my arm. "Have a wonderful class, Jenny. Learn lots of interesting things about chemicals and reactions." The emphasis on those last words chilled me. Even now, she was thinking about the acid. But in her eagerness to begin psychological torture, she'd made a crucial mistake. She had revealed her hand too early. Watching her walk away, blonde hair catching sunlight, I felt something I'd never experienced in my previous life. Power. Knowledge was power, and I now possessed something Melissa could never anticipate. I knew her plan. I knew her timeline. And most importantly, I knew how her story was supposed to end. But this time, I'd be writing a very different ending. The chemistry building doors closed behind me with a soft thud, and I smiled. Melissa thought she was so clever, manipulating a naive girl who trusted too easily. She had no idea the prey had become the predator, and unlike her, I wouldn't wait 7 months to begin my work. Professor Williams was exactly as I remembered. Wild grey hair, coffee-stained lab coat, and the habit of tapping his pen against the whiteboard when explaining complex molecular structures. But this time, I wasn't frantically taking notes like the other students. I was watching. Specifically, I was watching Rebecca Torres in the 3rd row, desperately scribbling everything down with increasing panic as she fell behind. In my previous life, I'd been too focused on my own studies to notice her struggle. But now I remembered what came next. Rebecca would fail this class, lose her scholarship, and drop out by December. More importantly, I remembered who had offered to help her. After class, I lingered near the door as students filed out. Right on schedule, Melissa appeared, having finished her own morning classes early. She scanned the room with practiced casualness before her gaze settled on Rebecca, who was still at her desk, staring at her inadequate notes with tears threatening to spill. "Excuse me," Melissa approached with her signature sweet smile. "You look like you could use some help. I'm Melissa. I took this class last semester with Professor Chen." The lie rolled off her tongue effortlessly. Melissa had never taken organic chemistry. Her major was psychology, specifically focused on manipulation and behavioral control. But Rebecca didn't know that. Really? Rebecca looked up with desperate hope. I'm so lost already, and it's only the first day. Oh, honey, don't worry. Professor Williams is notorious for moving too fast in the beginning. Here, let me give you my number. I have some old notes that might help. I watched this scene unfold with new understanding. In my previous timeline, I'd seen Melissa tutoring Rebecca several times, always speaking in hushed tones about special study techniques and confidence boosters. Rebecca had seemed happier, more confident, almost like a different person. Now I knew why. The same way I knew why Rebecca would suddenly become obsessed with someone else's boyfriend. The same way I knew why she'd start shoplifting expensive items she couldn't afford. The same way I knew why she'd develop an eating disorder that would hospitalize her by spring. Melissa wasn't just planning to destroy me. She was collecting broken girls like trophies, each one a test subject for different methods of psychological manipulation. I pulled out my phone and pretended to check messages while actually recording their conversation. Every word would be useful later. Just meet me at the library tonight around 8, Melissa was saying. 2nd floor, study room C. I'll bring everything you need to catch up. Rebecca nodded eagerly, clutching Melissa's number like a lifeline. As they parted ways, I followed at a distance, watching Melissa's performance dissolve the moment she thought no one was looking. Her sweet expression hardened into something calculating and cold. She pulled out a small notebook, the same one I'd seen her writing in countless times, though I'd never questioned what it contained. Now, as she made quick notes while walking, I realised it was her hunting log. Names, weaknesses, methods of approach. My name was probably already in there, along with detailed observations about my habits, my fears, my vulnerabilities. I needed to see that notebook. That evening, I told Melissa I was going to the campus gym, then doubled back to watch the library from across the quad. Through the 2nd floor windows, I could see Melissa setting up in study room C, arranging papers and what looked like a small jewellery box on the table. Not a music box, something smaller, more subtle, but I recognised the same dark energy radiating from it, even from this distance. Rebecca arrived right on time, looking nervous but hopeful. I watched them settle in, Melissa's animated gestures, and Rebecca's eager nodding. Everything looked perfectly normal, just one student helping another, but I knew better. I circled around the library's side entrance, the one near the maintenance access that was always left unlocked. My previous life's late-night study sessions had taught me all the building's security blind spots. The 2nd floor was nearly empty at this hour. I crept along the wall until I reached study room C, pressing myself against the door to listen. Just hold it while you read, Melissa was saying, her voice honey-sweet. It's a family heirloom, a confidence charm. My grandmother swore it helped her focus during exams. It's beautiful, Rebecca's voice sounded slightly dreamy. I feel different already. Good. Now, let's talk about what you really want, Rebecca. Not what you think you should want, but what your heart desires most. There was a long pause. When Rebecca spoke again, her voice had an odd flat quality. I want to be special. I want people to notice me. I want to matter. Of course you do. And you should have those things. Now, there's someone I want you to meet. His name is Professor Vincent Hayes. He teaches advanced psychology. Very handsome, very successful, very married. My blood ran cold. Professor Hayes was a respected faculty member with a wife and 2 young children. In my previous timeline, rumours had circulated about him having an affair with a student, but nothing was ever proven. The scandal had destroyed his career and his family. Now I knew who that student had been. But he's married, Rebecca said, though her protest sounded weak. Marriages end all the time, Melissa replied casually. And you deserve to be happy, don't you? You deserve to have what you want? Yes, Rebecca's voice was getting dreamier. I deserve to be happy. Exactly. Now, here's what we're going to do. I'd heard enough. I slipped away from the door, my mind racing. Melissa wasn't just planning to destroy me, she was systematically ruining lives across campus, using some kind of supernatural influence to manipulate vulnerable girls into destructive behaviour. But why? What was her endgame? I made my way back to our dorm, arriving before Melissa returned from her tutoring session. I had maybe an hour to search her belongings before she came back. Her side of the room looked innocent enough. Textbooks, photos, the usual college clutter, but I knew where she'd hide anything important. In my previous life, I'd once borrowed her laptop charger from her desk drawer and noticed how protective she was of that space. The drawer was locked, but I remembered her hiding the key behind her mirror, a location she'd revealed once when she thought I wasn't paying attention. My fingers found the small silver key taped to the back of the mirror frame. Inside the drawer was her notebook, along with several small objects wrapped in black cloth. I opened the notebook first, and my worst fears were confirmed. Page after page of names, dates, detailed psychological profiles. Not just Rebecca and me, but dozens of other girls. Some names I recognised, students who dropped out suddenly or transferred schools or had mysterious breakdowns. Each entry included notes about their weaknesses, their desires, and which charm had been used on them. My own entry was extensive. 3 full pages documenting my routines, my relationship with David, my career ambitions, my trust issues with my family. At the bottom, in Melissa's careful handwriting, subject shows strong resistance to direct manipulation, will require extended timeline and ultimate sacrifice method. Music box, acquired. Final phase planned for March 15th. March 15th. My birthday. The day she'd originally planned to give me that cursed music box. I photographed every page with trembling hands. Then, carefully unwrapped one of the black cloth bundles. Inside was a small silver locket, tarnished with age, and radiating the same dark energy I'd felt from the music box. Another bundle contained an antique ring. A third held a pair of earrings that looked like they belonged in a Victorian mourning collection. Each item was tagged with a name and date. These were her weapons, cursed objects that somehow allowed her to influence their victims' minds and behaviour. But where was she getting them? And more importantly, who was teaching her to use them? I was rewrapping the last item when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Melissa's laugh, accompanied by another voice, male, older, unfamiliar. "The Torres girl is progressing nicely," the man was saying as they approached our door. "She should be completely under influence within the week." "And the primary target?" Melissa asked. "Patience, my dear. Jenny requires a more delicate approach. Her natural resistance is stronger than we anticipated, but the timeline remains unchanged. March 15th will be perfect. Her birthday gift will be her final gift." The voices stopped right outside our door. I quickly locked Melissa's drawer, replaced the key, and dove into my bed, pretending to be asleep just as the door opened. Through barely cracked eyelids, I saw Melissa enter with a tall, thin man in an expensive suit. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him in the dim light. "She's sleeping," Melissa whispered. "Perfect. This will only take a moment." The man approached my bed, pulling out what looked like an old-fashioned pocket watch. He held it over my sleeping form and began whispering words in a language I didn't recognise. I forced myself to breathe evenly to maintain the illusion of sleep, even as every instinct screamed at me to run. Whatever he was doing, I could feel it trying to sink into my mind like oil seeping into water. But something was different this time. The invasive presence that should have been taking hold was sliding off me like water off glass. My rebirth had changed something fundamental. I was no longer as vulnerable to their supernatural manipulation. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the man stepped back. "Curious," he murmured. "Her resistance is even stronger than before. We may need to accelerate the timeline." "But you said March 15th was optimal," Melissa hissed. "Plans change, my dear. Continue your surveillance, but be prepared to move quickly if necessary. And, Melissa," his voice dropped to a threatening whisper, "don't disappoint me again. You know what happens to those who fail me." The door closed behind them, leaving me alone with the echo of his threat and the growing certainty that I was dealing with something far more dangerous than a jealous roommate. Melissa wasn't working alone, and whoever her partner was, he had plans that extended far beyond my death. The next morning, I watched Melissa sleep with new eyes. Her face, peaceful in slumber, gave no hint of the monster beneath. But I could see the subtle signs now. The way her fingers twitched as if grasping for something, the occasional cruel smile that flickered across her lips during dreams. I had spent the entire night researching, using the university library's database access to dig into every name from her notebook. What I found made my stomach turn. 17 girls over the past 2 years. 17 lives destroyed through accidents, mental breakdowns, and poor choices. And every single one had been connected to Melissa Chen before their downfall. But now I had advantages she couldn't know about. My resistance to supernatural manipulation was just the beginning. In my previous life, I'd been reactive, always playing defense. This time, I would be the predator. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Coffee later? I have something exciting to tell you." Perfect timing. In the original timeline, David had asked me out today, 3 weeks earlier than he was supposed to, according to Melissa's notebook. She'd planned for us to meet in November, giving her months to sabotage our relationship. But my changed behaviour was already disrupting her carefully laid plans. I texted back, "Absolutely. Library cafe at 2. Melissa stirred as I gathered my things for class. "Going somewhere early?" she asked, her voice still heavy with sleep. "Study group for Professor Williams," I lied smoothly. "You know how behind I am." Her eyes sharpened slightly. "I could help you catch up. I'm really good with chemistry." Another lie. I'd already verified that Melissa had never taken organic chemistry, despite what she'd told Rebecca. "That's sweet, but I need to figure this out myself." For just a moment, her mask slipped. A flash of irritation crossed her features before the sweet smile returned. Of course, independence is so important. As I left the dorm, I felt her watching me through the window. Let her watch. Today, I would begin gathering my own army. My first stop was the campus security office. Officer Martinez had always been kind to students, but more importantly, I remembered he'd lost his own daughter to what everyone assumed was suicide. Only I knew better now. "Officer Martinez, I'm Jenny Walsh from Hartwell Dorm. I was hoping I could ask you about something sensitive." His weathered face creased with concern. "What kind of sensitive?" I pulled out my phone, showing him the photos I'd taken of Melissa's notebook. "I found this in my roommate's possession. I think she might be involved in something dangerous." His expression grew grim as he scrolled through the images. When he reached the entry about his daughter Emma, his hands began to shake. "Where did you get this?" "Emma's name is in there," I said gently, along with dates that match her final weeks. "I think my roommate was involved in what happened to her." The pen in his hand snapped. For a long moment, he stared at the photos, his jaw working silently. When he finally spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. "What do you need from me?" "Information about the man she's working with. Tall, thin, expensive suit, probably faculty or administration. He was in my dorm room last night, and they were discussing plans for other students." Martinez nodded slowly. "I'll pull security footage from your building. And Jenny, be very, very careful. if what you're showing me is real. He met my eyes. Some monsters hide behind human faces. I spent the morning establishing alibis and planting seeds of doubt. In Professor Williams' class, I made sure to sit next to Rebecca, who looked exhausted and kept touching the locket Melissa had given her. "That's a beautiful necklace," I commented during the break. Rebecca's hand flew to the locket protectively. "It's helping me focus. My friend said it would make me special." "Special? How?" I kept my tone casual, curious. Her eyes glazed slightly. "I'm going to get everything I deserve, starting with Professor Hayes." I felt sick, but pressed on. "Professor Hayes? Isn't he married?" "Not for long," Rebecca giggled, the sound wrong and hollow. "Some people don't deserve to be happy if they're keeping other people from their dreams." The supernatural influence was stronger than I'd thought. Rebecca was completely under Melissa's control, being turned into a weapon against an innocent family. But every supernatural object had a weakness. I just had to find it. After class, I followed Rebecca at a distance, watching as she headed toward the psychology building with unnatural determination. She waited outside Professor Hayes' office like a predator stalking prey, her behaviour growing more erratic by the minute. When Hayes finally appeared, Rebecca practically threw herself at him. "Professor, I was hoping we could discuss my research proposal over coffee." Hayes, a kind man in his 40s, looked uncomfortable but polite. "Miss Torres, perhaps we should schedule office hours." "Please," Rebecca's voice took on a desperate, almost hypnotic quality. "It would mean so much to me. I promise you won't regret it." I saw the exact moment the supernatural influence tried to take hold. Hayes' expression softened, his resistance wavering, but before he could respond, I stepped forward. "Rebecca, there you are!" I linked my arm through hers, feeling the dark energy radiating from her locket like a physical presence. "Sorry, Professor Hayes. She promised to help me with something urgent." Rebecca tried to pull away, her eyes blazing with unnatural fury. "Jenny, let go of me." "Just for a few minutes," I said firmly, dragging her away from the confused professor. "It's about the chemistry assignment." Once we were alone, Rebecca's supernatural rage erupted. "You ruined everything. He was going to notice me, choose me." "Rebecca, listen to yourself. This isn't you talking." But she was beyond reasoning. The locket around her neck was glowing faintly, feeding off her emotions and amplifying them. She raised her hand as if to strike me, her face twisted with unnatural hatred. That's when I saw him. Jerome Patterson, lurking near the building entrance. In my previous life, he'd been nothing more than the creepy grad student who made everyone uncomfortable. He'd been accused of stalking female students, but nothing was ever proven. Now I understood why. He wasn't just a creep. He was one of Melissa's discarded test subjects, broken by whatever supernatural object she'd used on him and left as a walking warning of her power. But Jerome's obsessions could be redirected. I grabbed the locket from Rebecca's neck, ignoring her screams of protest, and ran toward Jerome. He looked up as I approached, his eyes immediately fixating on the glowing pendant. "Pretty," he whispered, reaching for it with trembling hands. "So pretty. Like the others." The moment his skin made contact with the locket, Rebecca's supernatural rage vanished, replaced by confusion and horror at her own behaviour. The dark energy had found a new host, one whose mind was already broken enough to contain it without being destroyed. Jerome clutched the locket to his chest, his expression shifting from vacant to cunning. "She wants me to have this," he said, his voice gaining confidence. "The pretty girl wants me to be special." I watched in fascination as the supernatural influence tried to reshape his obsessions, but Jerome's existing mental fractures caused the magic to scatter in unexpected directions. Instead of focused manipulation, he was becoming erratic, dangerous in unpredictable ways. Perfect. The pretty girl who gave this to Rebecca, I said carefully. Do you know where she lives? Jerome nodded eagerly. I know where all the pretty girls live. I watch them. I protect them. This girl has dark hair, sweet smile, psychology major. She needs protection too. His grip on the locket tightened. I'll protect her. I'll protect all of them. As Jerome shuffled away, still clutching the cursed object, I felt a grim satisfaction. Melissa's own weapon was now in the hands of someone she couldn't control, someone whose obsessions would draw him straight to her. At 2 p.m. sharp, I met David at the library cafe. He was even more handsome than I remembered. Dark hair, intelligent brown eyes, the kind of smile that had made my heart race in my previous life. Jenny, I'm so glad you could meet me, he said, standing as I approached. I've been trying to work up the courage to ask you this for weeks. I knew what was coming, but I let him continue. Would you like to go to dinner with me? There's this new Italian place off campus. I'd love to, I said, meaning it completely. His relief was palpable. Great! How about Friday night? As we talked about our upcoming date, I noticed Melissa entering the cafe. She spotted us immediately, her face cycling through shock, rage, and calculation, before settling on hurt confusion. She approached our table with her trademark innocent smile. Jenny, I didn't know you were meeting anyone. Aren't you going to introduce me? Of course. David, this is my roommate Melissa. Melissa, this is David Chen. David extended his hand politely, but I saw Melissa's eyes narrow as she processed his last name. In her notebook, she'd written extensively about her plans to acquire David through careful manipulation and timing. Finding us together 3 weeks early was disrupting everything. How lovely, she said, her voice strained. Jenny, I hate to interrupt, but there's been an emergency. Rebecca Torres is missing and the police want to question anyone who's seen her recently. A lie, but a clever one designed to separate David and me while making her seem helpful. That's terrible, David said, looking genuinely concerned. Should we help look for her? Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, let me call Officer Martinez. I saw Rebecca earlier today and she seemed upset. Melissa's mask slipped slightly. She hadn't expected me to have police contacts or to take initiative. Martinez answered on the second ring. Jenny, did you find something? I'm with David Chen and my roommate Melissa, I said loudly enough for them to hear. Melissa says Rebecca Torres is missing. Miss Torres is fine, Martinez replied, his voice carrying clearly. She's here giving a statement about some harassment she experienced. But thank you for checking. Melissa's face went pale. Rebecca was supposed to be completely under her control, not talking to police about harassment. Well, Melissa said, forcing brightness into her voice, I must have misunderstood. I'll leave you two to your coffee. As she walked away, I caught the murderous look she shot over her shoulder. Her carefully laid plans were crumbling, and she knew I was responsible. David reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Your roommate seems nice, but there's something about her that makes me uncomfortable. Trust that instinct, I said quietly. Always trust that instinct when it comes to Melissa. That evening, I returned to the dorm to find chaos. Melissa was on the phone, her voice high with panic. Jerome, you need to bring it back. That's not how it works. She hung up and turned to me, her mask completely gone. What did you do? I don't know what you mean. Rebecca is talking to police about harassment. Jerome Patterson has something that belongs to me. And somehow, David Chen asked you out 3 weeks ahead of schedule. Her voice rose with each word. Nothing is going according to plan. I met her gaze steadily. Maybe your plan wasn't as perfect as you thought. For a moment, I saw the real Melissa. Not the sweet roommate or the calculating predator, but something desperate and dangerous backed into a corner. You have no idea what you're interfering with, she snarled. There are forces at work here bigger than your small mind can comprehend. Then maybe you should have thought of that before you decided to murder me. The words hung in the air between us, a declaration of war neither of us could take back. Melissa's laugh was sharp and humourless. So you do know how deliciously complicated this has become? She moved to her dresser, pulling out a small silver bell. No matter. If the timeline must be accelerated, so be it. She rang the bell once, and its sound seemed to echo far longer than it should have, carrying with it a promise of darkness. Sleep well, Jenny, she said sweetly. Tomorrow, everything changes. The bell's echo hadn't even faded when our dorm room door burst open. The tall man in the expensive suit strode in, his face thunderous with rage. Behind him followed two other figures, a woman with silver hair and eyes like winter frost, and another man whose presence made the air itself feel heavy. You incompetent child, he snarled at Melissa. 17 successful acquisitions, and you can't handle one simple college girl? Melissa cowered before him. Master Vincent, she's not normal. She has resistance I've never encountered before. And somehow she knew. Silence. Vincent's gaze fixed on me, and I felt the full weight of his supernatural power pressing against my mind. Jenny Walsh, so interesting that you would develop immunity to our influences. Tell me, when exactly did you die? The casual way he asked the question sent ice through my veins. He knew. Somehow he knew about my rebirth. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, but my voice betrayed me with its tremor. Vincent smiled, and it was the most terrible expression I'd ever seen. Oh, but you do. Death leaves marks, my dear. Spiritual scars that those of us with sight can read like books. You died on March 15th, in this very room, consumed by acid while a music box played its cursed melody. Then, something or someone sent you back. The silver-haired woman stepped forward, her voice like wind through a graveyard. The question is, why? What makes Jenny Walsh worthy of resurrection when so many others have perished? I backed toward the window, my mind racing. They weren't just supernatural manipulators, they were something far worse. And they'd been using Melissa as their agent, collecting broken souls for some darker purpose. The previous attempts were practice, Vincent continued, circling me like a predator. Melissa needed to learn her craft before we trusted her with the main objective. You see, Jenny, your death was never about jealousy or stolen opportunities. You were selected because of your unique spiritual resonance. Your soul, properly harvested, will allow us to... A crash from outside interrupted him. Through the window, I could see Jerome Patterson stumbling across the courtyard, the cursed locket still clutched in his hands. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, like a grotesque parade, shuffled the other victims. Girls whose lives had been destroyed by Melissa's supernatural manipulations. Rebecca Torres walked among them, her eyes blank but purposeful. Emma Martinez, Officer Martinez's daughter, who was supposed to be dead, moved with jerky, unnatural steps. A dozen others I recognized from the notebook photos. They were all heading straight for our building. What have you done? Vincent spun toward Melissa, his composure finally cracking. I don't know, Melissa shrieked. The locket should have stayed with Jerome. It shouldn't be calling to the others. But I understood. Jerome's broken mind had fractured the locket's focused power, turning it from a tool of individual manipulation into a beacon that called to all those who had been touched by similar dark magic. Every girl Melissa had destroyed was being drawn back, their supernatural bonds pulling them toward revenge. Vincent's eyes blazed with fury. You gave a fractured vessel an object of binding. The spiritual resonance is creating a feedback loop. The building shook as the zombie-like parade reached the entrance. I could hear doors slamming open below, the sound of many feet on stairs. Master, the third man spoke for the first time. his voice unnaturally deep. "We must complete the primary objective now, before the convergence destabilizes our entire operation." Vincent nodded grimly. "Indeed. Melissa, prepare the emergency ritual. We'll take what we need from the girl and retreat." Melissa scrambled to her dresser, pulling out the original music box, the one that had killed me in my previous life. But as she opened the lid, nothing happened. The tiny ballerina remained still, the cursed melody silent. "It's not working," she cried. "Because I'm not the same person who died," I said, understanding flooding through me. "When I came back, something fundamental changed. Your magic can't touch me anymore because I've already experienced death. I'm beyond your reach." Vincent's laugh was bitter. "Perhaps, but you're not beyond physical reach." He lunged forward, but the door to our room exploded inward. Jerome Patterson stood in the doorway, his eyes wild with supernatural fury, the locket now glowing so brightly it hurt to look at. Behind him, the army of broken girls pressed forward. "Pretty girls," Jerome whispered, his gaze fixed on Melissa. "Pretty girls who lie, pretty girls who hurt. The voices in the pretty locket tell me what pretty girls deserve." Melissa tried to run, but Rebecca and Emma blocked her path. The other victims surrounded Vincent and his companions, their movements coordinated by some shared supernatural consciousness. "This is impossible," Vincent snarled. "Fractured vessels can't maintain collective thought." "Unless," the silver-haired woman said with growing horror, "something else is directing them, something that understands our methods and is using them against us." All eyes turned to me, and I felt a presence stirring within my own consciousness. Not invasive like their dark magic, but protective, familiar. The force that had sent me back, that had given me this second chance, was still with me. "You made one crucial mistake," I said, my voice carrying power I didn't fully understand. "You assumed death was the end. But some bonds transcend mortality. Some justice demands more than one lifetime to achieve." The temperature in the room plummeted. Frost began forming on the windows as spiritual energy built to a crescendo. The victims moved as one, their vacant eyes fixed on their tormentors. Vincent tried to retreat, but Emma Martinez grabbed his arm with supernatural strength. "You killed me," she said, her voice echoing with the pain of 17 girls. "You killed us all." "And now," Rebecca added, her grip tightening on Melissa's wrist, "it's your turn." What followed was not violence, but justice of a more profound kind. The cursed objects that had been used to manipulate and destroy began turning their power inward, feeding on the very people who had wielded them. Vincent aged decades in seconds, his expensive suit crumbling to dust. The silver-haired woman screamed as her own reflected malice consumed her from within. Melissa fought desperately, but the music box in her hands began playing its cursed melody. Not for me, but for her. The acid that had once burned through my flesh materialized around her, and her final screams echoed the very words she had spoken to me in my previous death. "Why? Why?" "Because," I said quietly, "everything should have been ours." When the supernatural storm finally subsided, only I remained standing in the devastated room. The victims had found peace, their spirits finally released from bondage. The manipulators had faced the fate they had planned for so many others. But I wasn't done. 3 months later, I stood in the office of the university president, a stack of evidence in my hands. Officer Martinez stood beside me, his own investigation having uncovered the full scope of Vincent's operation. "Professor Vincent Hayes," I said, noting how the president paled at the mention of the name. "He was more than just psychology faculty, wasn't he?" The president's hand shook as he reviewed the documents. Bank records showing payments to Melissa, correspondence about research subjects, evidence of a supernatural trafficking ring that had been operating on campus for years. "We had no idea," he whispered. "But you will now," Martinez said grimly, "and you'll implement every safety measure we recommend, or this story goes public." As we left the administration building, I felt a hand slip into mine. David smiled at me, his presence warm and reassuring. "It's really over?" he asked. "This part is," I said. "But there are other Vincent Hayes out there, other operations like this one. The supernatural world has been preying on vulnerable people for too long." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw the news about the university investigation. My daughter died under similar circumstances at State College last year. Can we talk? Dr. Patricia Kim." I showed David the message. "Looks like we're not done after all." He squeezed my hand. "Then we'd better get started." As we walked across campus, I caught a glimpse of a figure watching us from the library steps, a young woman with haunted eyes and a notebook clutched to her chest. For just a moment, our gazes met and I saw recognition there. Fear, hope, another victim who had survived. Another person who needed help navigating the supernatural darkness that lurked beneath the ordinary world. I smiled and nodded toward her. She hesitated, then slowly approached. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you Jenny Walsh? The one who exposed the Vincent Hayes case?" "I am." "My name is Lisa Chen, no relation to Vincent," she added quickly. I think something similar happened to me at my previous school. My roommate gave me this necklace, and after that, everything went wrong. I lost my scholarship, my boyfriend, almost my mind. But when I tried to throw the necklace away, she pulled a familiar-looking pendant from her pocket. Dark energy radiated from it like heat from a flame. "It keeps coming back," she whispered, "and I keep having dreams about a music box." David and I exchanged glances. The Vincent Hayes operation was finished, but the supernatural predators who had supplied him were still out there, still hunting, still collecting broken souls and cursed objects. "Lisa," I said gently, "how would you feel about helping us stop this from happening to anyone else?" Her eyes lit up with the same fierce determination I felt burning in my own heart. "I'd like that very much." As the three of us walked toward the coffee shop to plan our next move, I couldn't help but smile. Vincent and Melissa had thought they were hunting prey, collecting victims for their dark purposes. They had never considered the possibility that some prey might bite back, that some victims might become hunters. That death might not be the end of the story, but only the beginning of justice. The war against the supernatural predators was just beginning, and I had an army of survivors ready to fight. After all, they had taught us well, and now we would use everything they had shown us against them. The hunted had become the hunters, and we were very, very good at what we did.